Even though construction was approved, more challenges lay ahead.
The Tennessee-Tom Bigby Waterway is unique in the fact that it was the first major civil works project that was developed and constructed under the new environmental laws that were coming into effect in the early 70s.
About the same time it was funded for construction, the Congress passed the National Environmental Policy Act that required that an environmental impact statement be prepared for any major federal action that was going to significantly affect the environment, and the Tenn-Tom fit into that category.
Suddenly, the Corps of Engineers had to prepare EISs for numerous projects. Legal challenges were launched for non-compliance with NEPA. This led to the first court battle for Tenn-Tom. The Committee for Leaving the Environment of America Natural, or CLEAN, along with the Environmental Defense Fund, filed suit in the U.S. District Court of Washington, D.C. in July 1971.
That was a strictly environmental attack, saying that the Corps had not adequately disclosed the adverse environmental impacts in their environmental impact statement.
Those were tough times for the Corps of Engineers particularly, and also those who depended on the Corps of Engineers to get the projects built, because we had to do a lot of fixing of ourselves, and also a lot of time representing ourselves in court for the challenges that NEPA brought.
The U.S. Department of Justice represented the federal government. The Waterway Authority and Tom Bigby River Valley Water Management District joined as defendant interveners to represent the non-federal interests in the waterway. Hunter Golson represented the authority and became a key member of the case's defense team.
We did intervene, and the lawsuit was transferred from the District of Columbia to the Northern District of Mississippi. It was much more likely that the court in the district in which the waterway would be constructed would be favorable than a judge in Washington.
Before the change of venue, the D.C. District Court granted a preliminary injunction to halt the start of construction. The opponents of the Tenn-Tom had scored their first victory. Judge William Cady heard the case in August 1972. After 8 days of hearings, he ruled in favor of the government. Judge Cady lifted the preliminary injunction, paving the way for construction to start. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals denied appeals of that decision, as well as the district court's dismissal of the lawsuit itself. The plaintiffs declined to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. Instead, they marshaled their resources and found new allies to launch another legal assault later in 1976. The Corps awarded the waterway's first construction contract in November of 1972, after more than a year of delays. Work began the following month on Heflin Lock. 10 locks were required along the 234-mile waterway, making it, at that time, the largest and most complex project ever built by the Corps. Nearly 307 million cubic yards of earth would be excavated along its route, or 1.5 times as much as that dug for the Panama Canal. This made the Tennessee-Tom Bigby one of the largest earth-moving projects in history. This large construction zone and the permanent flooding of nearly 44,000 acres had its environmental consequences. The Corps went to great expense to lessen the environmental impact of the waterway. Stennis Lock and Dam was relocated to save Plymouth Bluff, a historic and archaeologically significant site near Columbus. The Upper Tom Bigby was preserved in its natural state by redirecting the waterway's route via a chain of small lakes.
We started out with plans that looked very man-made and evolved into disposal areas that were contoured and rounded and contained, again, with wildlife ponds and wildlife habitat vegetation. I think in some cases the areas were better for the environment, better for wildlife than when we first got there.
Although construction had begun, the waterway opponents did not concede defeat. On November 30th, 1976, the Environmental Defense Fund joined the L&N Railroad to file another suit in the D.C. District Court to stop the Tenn-Tom. As in its previous case, this suit was transferred to Judge Cady in Mississippi at the defendant's request. The suit contained 15 complaints against the Corps and the government.
The judge divided the lawsuit actually in he divided it up, and he said, we're going to address the authority issue first, because if the Corps is building something they're not authorized to build, the legislative language, authorizing language, said something to the effect that the waterway was to be built, you know, from Pickwick to Demopolis at certain dimensions with such changes as might be approved by the Secretary of Army.
The basic charge was General Pick, when he was Chief of Engineers, authorized some changes in the project based on a general design memorandum which the Secretary of the Army approved. That was a crux of the charge in many ways.
In March 1979, Judge Cady ruled in favor of the Corps on the question of its discretionary authority to make post-authorization changes. Later, in October 1980, he dismissed the other counts.
It was appealed to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and they approved part of his judgment, but they disagreed on the supplemental environmental impact statement, and so they required that a supplement to the environmental impact statement be prepared.
However, the appeals court ordered the Corps to stop construction and not award any new contracts until NEPA had been satisfied concerning the project modifications. Hunter Golson, representing the authority and the compact states, filed a petition to the Fifth Circuit seeking to modify the injunction.
The Corps urged the Justice Department to appeal that or seek a rehearing. They refused to do that because it was their policy that if a Circuit Court of Appeals had spoken, they would accept that and they wouldn't try to go any further. We were not bound by that. So the Tennessee-Tom Bigby Waterway Development Authority sought a rehearing and asked the Fifth Circuit to reconsider.
The Court of Appeals modified its order to permit Judge Cady to withdraw the injunction to give the Corps time to complete its supplemental impact statement.
And at that time, Judge Cady said, you lawyers get together and decide which contracts can proceed and which contracts can't.
But when it came to the negotiations, we were able to provide that none of the lead items were stopped. We stopped things that could afford to be stopped. None of them were the lead items with respect to the completion of the project. And that really let the project continue, took the heat off the EIS, which we were able to continue on and do.
In our pleadings, argument, we pointed out that there were many impoverished and minority workers working on these contracts, and it would be an economic disaster to them to have the construction stopped.
Minority People's Council stands between the environmentalists and the developmentalists. On the one hand, we're concerned with our environment and thus empathize with those who fight to save the wildlife and the naturalness of a scenic river. But on the environmental question at this time, that's a luxury that the poor people cannot afford.
The Corps rushed its supplemental EIS to completion, and this was approved by Judge Cady. The U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear the plaintiff's appeal. The years of judicial battles over the Tennessee-Tom Bigby came to an end. Few public works projects had ever withstood such environmental scrutiny and legal challenges, but other hurdles were yet to come.